After his husband died, Caleb got involved with another alpha. It happened to be during the man's rut, a wild and carnal encounter that left an indelible mark. Pregnant and alone, he spent the better part of a year hiding, but they found him anyway. The alpha had cornered him, a wry twist to his lips, and observed that the little widower had some nerve. Not only did he skip out on his debt, but he'd stolen his kids too. His parents had sold him off for $5,000 to a low-ranking alpha. After the arrangement, Caleb had resolved to make the best of it, to build a life like any normal person. He didn't cry when he learned his husband was impotent. When 2 years passed without a child, and a clinic visit diagnosed him as a recessive omega with low fertility, he didn't cry then either. He didn't even cry through the beatings. But when his husband finally died, Caleb wept with pure, unadulterated joy. The useless man was gone. He was free. His husband had left him nothing but a tiny 60-square-foot house, which should have been more than enough for one person. But when waves of debt collectors started kicking in his door, the tears finally came. They informed him that his husband had mortgaged the house right before he died, taking out a massive loan he'd promptly lost at a casino. Now, Caleb was on the hook for the rest, or they'd throw him in a brothel to work it off. The fury was immense. He wished the bastard had died sooner. He didn't want to be beaten to death, and he certainly didn't want to sell his body. Terrified, he took on 3 jobs, working himself to the bone. Every paycheck was snatched from his hands before it could even warm his pocket. The immense pressure morphed into a gnawing hunger, both for food and for something more primal. He'd always been frugal, but he figured as a widower, a little indulgence was allowed. He went on a hookup app and found a profile with a torso for a picture and a clean bill of health attached. It was time to blow off some steam. He got off his last shift at 10 p.m. and messaged the alpha, telling him he'd be waiting in the alley beside the diner. There was no reply. When he turned into the narrow, brick-lined space, he found a man already leaning against the wall. The profile picture hadn't lied about the abs, and his face was stunningly handsome, though his eyes were unfocused and hazy. A potent, overpowering scent of pheromones saturated the air. It was odd. The alpha he was supposed to meet was recessive, but this man's scent was overwhelming, top tier. Caleb's knees buckled for a second before he shook his head, clearing the strange feeling. He muttered to himself that it was no wonder the guy hadn't messaged back. He was clearly in the middle of a rut. A rut was good. An alpha in a rut was ferocious. He managed to half-drag, half-carry the man to a cheap motel off the highway. Inside, they stripped and stumbled into the shower. As Caleb washed him, the alpha seemed to regain a flicker of clarity. His hand shot out, clamping around Caleb's neck as a cold smirk spread across his face. He snarled about Caleb having some serious skills to have tracked him down like this. An alpha in a rut was definitely volatile. Caleb didn't understand the words, but it didn't matter. As long as he got what he came for, he pulled the man to the bed. The grip on his neck vanished, replaced by an urgent, almost desperate mouthing at his skin, from his collarbone to the nape of his neck. It hurt. The room was thick with the alpha scent, but Caleb felt no responding arousal. His omega instincts, outside of his own rare heats, were muted. Other than a pervasive weakness, his body remained stubbornly inert. He lay back, spreading his limbs, and told the alpha in a near-brutal whisper to skip the foreplay and just take him hard. He needed the physical pain to feel that he was still alive. The alpha's grip was strong, yet he was surprisingly meticulous. A hand explored Caleb's backside, and the man murmured that it wasn't ready. He seemed confused, asking if Caleb was even an omega. He pressed his nose to the back of Caleb's neck, inhaling deeply. He remarked that the scent was too faint. He wondered aloud if they'd changed their strategy this time, musing that this new person was unexpectedly to his liking. Caleb had no idea what he was talking about. Of course, the man was to his own liking. He'd arranged the meet himself. Caleb fumbled for a tube of lubricant, shoving it towards the man's mouth and telling him to stop talking. The alpha paused, his eyes flashing with a sharp intensity for a moment before clouding over again. He chuckled, thinking it was some kind of kinky game. He bit the cap off, lapping at the liquid like it was water. The excess dribbled down onto Caleb's stomach and thighs. Caleb stared, bewildered, asking what he was doing. He told him to drink water if he was thirsty, that this was a waste. Before he could finish, the man hoisted his hips with a powerful surge. Caleb's eyes widened, his feet tensing involuntarily. He climaxed instantly. He was stunned for a long moment. His late husband had never done anything like that for him. It was a lot. The alpha frowned, breaking his concentration to pat Caleb's thigh, murmuring for his darling to relax. A strange warmth bloomed in Caleb's chest, his pulse quickening. The air began to fill with his own scent, growing stronger. The alpha paused, then redoubled his efforts. Caleb's hands instinctively tangled in the man's hair. It was exhausting, a constant teasing approach to a climax that would recede the moment it was within reach, leaving him in a state of agonizing pleasure. Frustrated, he yanked the man's hair, pulling his head up. The alpha looked up, his lips slick, a hazy, captivating smile on his face. He observed that Caleb tasted like cherry cheesecake, then asked if he wasn't allowed to eat. Caleb managed to lift a leg and kick lightly at his back, telling him to cut out the extra stuff and just get to it. The man's body tensed, and he let out a ragged breath, crawling forward to rub against him. Caleb climaxed again. He begged, feeling utterly humiliated. He clamped both hands on the alpha's head, hissing through gritted teeth for him to just fuck him, to stop messing around. The alpha seemed almost hurt, his mood suddenly dropping. He lowered his head, whispering that it was his first time and he didn't want to hurt his omega, but he felt sad that Caleb only wanted his body. Caleb had no idea an alpha in a rut needed coddling. He cursed himself. He should have found someone with experience, not some young stud full of energy. Weren't college-aged guys supposed to be reckless? Before he could figure out how to coax the man into moving faster, he was flipped and turned, spending the rest of the night discovering the pleasure of being an omega. So this was what it was supposed to feel like. He was lost in the thought for a moment. The alpha, displeased with his distraction, seized his chin. He moved to bite it, then his lips traveled upward. The instant the man's mouth was about to cover his, Caleb wrenched his head away. Who was he to kiss him? This painful, desperate entanglement didn't deserve such a tender act. The alpha, furious at the rejection, went wild, leaving bites and marks all over Caleb's body, everywhere except his lips. Caleb drifted in and out of consciousness. Each time he woke, the alpha was still working tirelessly. He was completely spent. Long after the sun had risen, the alpha finally collapsed into a deep sleep. Caleb, his legs trembling, crawled out of bed. He gathered his scattered clothes from the floor and painfully pulled them on. He found $200 in his pocket. After a moment's thought, he pulled one bill out and stuffed it back. He told himself that while it was a great stress reliever, the man had made him so sore he'd miss work, so he was docking him $100 for the service fee. He stuck the $100 bill to the alpha's forehead and limped out of the motel. When he opened the hookup app again, he saw over a dozen messages from the guy he was supposed to meet. Most were furious tirades, cursing him for standing him up and demanding he reimburse him for the cab fare. Reimburse him? Wait, that wasn't the point. The point was he'd slept with the wrong person. He distinctly remembered the profile mentioning a tacky Hawaiian shirt. He scratched his head, feeling a strange sense of relief. Thank God for the mix-up. If the real guy was that cheap, a $100 fee would have been a non-starter. The stranger was much better. Unfortunately, he'd also cost him his job. Caleb's lateness got him fired by his heartless boss. He found new work in a different part of the city, washing dishes in a couple of kitchens. Without a degree, and with the common prejudice that omegas were too fragile for heavy labor and a liability if they went into heat, most places wouldn't hire him. Only convenience stores, diners, and certain shady bars and hotels were willing to take a chance. A month later, after working himself to exhaustion to pay another $10,000 toward the loan sharks, he finally collapsed. He was pregnant. He was sure the doctor was lying. It was impossible. He hadn't gotten pregnant in 3 years of marriage. How could he be pregnant now that his husband was dead? The doctor, with a knowing look, pushed his glasses up with his middle finger. A glint of light reflected off the lenses as he declared that there was only one truth. Caleb told him this wasn't the time for humor. He was scared. The doctor offered a professional smile, but his words were anything but. He suggested that Caleb's late husband had been cursing him. It was a bizarre reversal. Caleb had only ever heard his parents point at him and call him a curse on his husband. Terrified he might move back in and curse them too. To hear someone say his dead husband was the curse left him speechless. The doctor patted his shoulder and advised him to build a good life with his current partner. He held up 2 fingers with a kind smile. There were 2 of them. He showed Caleb the ultrasound, pointing out 2 tiny specks. He explained that as a recessive omega, his chances were low, so his alpha must be something special. He told Caleb to hold on to him. Caleb was dumbfounded. There was no his alpha. He'd had a one-night stand and run. Hold on to him? He couldn't even handle the man's basics. How was he supposed to hold on to a top-tier alpha? It was laughable. He walked back to his rented basement room in a daze, clutching the lab report. It had rained the night before, and water was still seeping through the ceiling, dripping into a wash basin he'd placed on the floor. He watched it for a long time. He thought about his situation, buried in debt. How could he possibly raise a child, let alone 2? A single drop broke from the ceiling early, hitting him on the head and jolting him back to reality. But he had no family of his own anymore. He needed family. He didn't want to get rid of the babies. There was only one solution. The money he earned could no longer go to paying off a dead man's debt. He hadn't borrowed it, hadn't spent it. Why should he be the one to pay? Caleb asked himself if 22 years of playing by the rules had been enough. He packed his few sets of clothes, his birth certificate, and his ID card. He left the cramped, damp basement room and ran. If he stayed, they would beat him for not paying. He could take a beating before. He couldn't now. 5 months later, in a seaside town, his belly had swollen like a balloon. At 5 months, he looked like he was 7 or 8 months along with a single baby. Working regular jobs was becoming difficult, and no one wanted to hire him anyway. He found small handicrafts he could do from his room. Every dollar that didn't go to food was saved for the babies. It was hard, but the anticipation gave him a reason to live. This quiet existence didn't last. One day, utterly exhausted, he overslept. He was violently woken by the sound of his door being kicked in. A group of tattooed thugs stormed the room. Before he could even panic, a sharp blow to the back of his neck sent him into darkness. When he came to, his hands and feet were bound, and he was lying on a cold floor, his stomach pressed against the chilling concrete. A pair of long legs stood before him. His eyes traveled up the black trousers to a loud, garish Hawaiian shirt, half tucked into the waistband. Further up, he saw the face and squeezed his eyes shut. It was over. He'd been caught. He thought it was the loan sharks, but it was the alpha he'd slept with. Either way, he was screwed. Still, he couldn't help but think that no self-respecting person paired a cheap Hawaiian shirt with expensive black dress pants. It was an assault on the eyes. The man in the shirt clicked his tongue in annoyance at Caleb's closed eyes. The toe of his leather shoe nudged Caleb's chin. He was told to open them. Fearing a kick to his stomach, Caleb obeyed, looking up at him timidly. The man squatted down, resting an elbow on his knee and propping his head up with one hand. With the other, he poked Caleb's belly. He raised an eyebrow, remarking that the little widower had some nerve. Not only did he skip out on his debt, but he'd stolen his kids too. He'd been a real pain to find. Caleb's world went dark for a second. What? This guy was also one of his dead husband's crores? It was one disaster after another. There was no way out now. His mind raced, desperate to protect his children. He lied, claiming the babies weren't his. He said he was 8 months along, which was why he was so big. The man let out a cold laugh, calling bullshit. He said if Caleb had been pregnant then, he would have fucked the pregnancy right out of him, then asked if Caleb was questioning his ability. Caleb was speechless. The man had no shame, talking like that in front of his crew. No wonder he was a loan shark. Caleb tried again, insisting he was carrying another man's twins. He reminded the man that he was promiscuous. The man's smile vanished. He grabbed Caleb's neck, squeezing hard. Caleb choked, a pained expression on his face. The man eased up, patting his shoulder a few times. He said darkly that it was perfect. All 3 of them could work for him to slowly pay off the debt. Caleb's shoulder throbbed, and he instinctively curled around his stomach, silent. The man paused, then stood and scanned the room. His voice was low, laced with fury, as he demanded to know who the hell had hit him. Hadn't he warned them to be civil with their clients? The tattooed men all turned to look at one of their own. The man shot him a death glare and ordered him to go get his punishment, 10 lashes. The thug's eyes widened, but he went without another word, his face a mask of misery. Caleb was confused. Was this crore reasonable? The others had always just yelled and hit him. But even if he was different, what could Caleb do? Death seemed like the only option. Otherwise, his children would be born into slavery, spending their lives paying off someone else's debt. Or maybe they'd be taken from him and raised as the next generation of criminals. He wanted neither. His gaze fell to his swollen belly. His hands were tied behind his back. He couldn't even touch it. He asked if they could untie him. His limbs were going numb. Afraid of refusal, he quickly added a promise not to run. The man hesitated, then squatted down again to untie the knots himself. After struggling for a moment without success, he exploded in frustration, demanding to know who the hell had tied the knots so tight, if they were studying for some kind of exam. One of the thugs dropped to his knees, begging for forgiveness and offering to take more lashes if he could just have a few less. The man laughed, a humorless sound, and beckoned him over. The thug scrambled to his feet, bowing obsequiously. The man slapped him on the back of the head, telling him not to just stand there but to untie the damn ropes. The thug, looking aggrieved, finally untied Caleb. Caleb rubbed his wrists. The man in the Hawaiian shirt watched him for a second before turning to chew out his subordinates one by one. As the feeling returned to his limbs, Caleb's eyes fixed on the man nearest to him. He saw the butt of a handgun tucked into his waistband. Grab it, chamber around, press it to his temple, pull the trigger. It would take seconds. Why was dying so easy when living was so hard? He moved without a sound, snatching the gun, racking the slide, and pressing the muzzle to his own head. Click. A dud. There was no pain, no end. Just silence. He was stunned. The room of thugs stared at him, frozen. The man in the Hawaiian shirt was the first to react, his fury erupting as he slapped the man Caleb had disarmed. He screamed at him for letting a pregnant man take his gun, calling him a useless piece of trash, and ordered everyone out. The crew scrambled from the warehouse. The man took a deep breath, his eyes red-rimmed. He seized Caleb's hand, prying the gun from his fingers. He demanded a good reason for what he'd just done. The dam of Caleb's composure broke. Tears he'd held back for so long streamed down his face. He sobbed, asking why there were no bullets. He cried that he couldn't live anymore. The man's face was grim. He told Caleb that nobody was forcing him to die. He asked if Caleb thought they were all just psychos from the movies. He wasn't looking at Caleb now. His head lowered as he methodically pulled a magazine from his own waistband, slid a bullet out, and loaded it into the gun. He explained that they didn't kill unless it was absolutely necessary. He chambered the round and handed the gun back to Caleb. Caleb didn't understand. He took the weapon with a trembling hand and raised it to his head. In a flash, the man yanked his arm down, pointing the gun at his own chest. He told Caleb that since there were only two of them there, he could choose to kill him instead. Caleb couldn't. He wasn't a murderer. What right did he have? And even if he did, there was a whole crew outside. He would never get away. He just kept shaking his head. The man let go, his hawk-like eyes boring into Caleb. He said that the debt could be paid back slowly. He wasn't a monster who would make the children work. He would provide housing and a well-paying job. But it was all contingent on one thing. Caleb had to live. It might take a lifetime to pay it all back right under his nose. He raised an eyebrow, a wicked smile playing on his lips as his gaze dropped to Caleb's stomach. The two kids would be his collateral. As long as Caleb didn't try any tricks, he guaranteed they would have a better life than Caleb could ever provide alone. Caleb thought he must be insane to even consider trusting a lone shark. He asked if it was true. If there was even a sliver of a chance to live a decent life, how could he possibly give up? He had endured for so many years for that very chance. The man shrugged, his hands open. He said it was up to Caleb whether he believed him or not. He turned and walked toward the warehouse exit, tossing a final sentence over his shoulder. His name was Julian, a dominant alpha, 24 years old, 6'2", 200 pounds, and 8 inches. Caleb's hand holding the gun went limp. He was confused. Did debtors need to know their crew's personal stats? And what was the 8 inches for? His shoe size? That seemed pretty small. In his confusion, his finger tightened, accidentally pulling the trigger. Even with a silencer, the shot was loud, making him jump. He frantically dropped the gun. Julian was back in front of him in a second, his expression frantic as he grabbed Caleb's shoulders, looking him over for injuries. Caleb blinked, thinking that Julian must have been serious about wanting him alive to pay off the debt. He decided to trust him for now. The next second, a torrent of curses rained down on him. Julian yelled, asking if he was crazy, if he thought it was a toy gun. He snatched the gun back, fuming that he never should have given it to him, and pulled Caleb along with him, forbidding him from ever touching a firearm again. He had just been brought to Julian's penthouse when his stomach let out a loud growl. Since becoming pregnant, he was always hungry. Demanding food from his crew right after being brought to his home felt deeply inappropriate. His face flushed. He hugged his belly and asked quietly what he was supposed to do. He assured Julian he could do anything, that he was a hard worker and would do any job well. Julian went to the balcony to make a call. Caleb assumed it was to arrange work for him and waited patiently. A few minutes later, one of the tattooed men arrived with several high-end takeout bags and set them on the dining table. He reported to his boss that he'd brought everything he'd asked for. Caleb stared, a knot of resentment tightening in his stomach. Was Julian going to make him work while he feasted right in front of him? He could already smell the food. He cursed silently. Of course, he was a gangster. No matter how normal he acted, he was still a scumbag. Caleb inhaled sharply, clenched his fists, and stayed put on the sofa, not daring to make a sound. Julian walked over and reached for his arm. He told him to roll up his sleeves. Confused but compliant, Caleb did as he was told. Maybe he just wanted a servant. Caleb carefully folded the sleeves of Julian's Hawaiian shirt up his arms, revealing strong, muscular forearms marked with a few faint scars. Julian asked if he liked what he saw. Caleb, thinking he meant the shirt, replied that he was asking about the Hawaiian shirt. Julian's lips curved. He said if Caleb said so, then it was so. After a moment, Caleb answered honestly that he didn't like it. It was too loud and didn't suit his face or his build. Julian's smile widened. He held out his other arm for Caleb to do the same. After Caleb finished, Julian went to the dining table and began unpacking the food, opening container after container of steaming dishes. Caleb looked away, holding his breath, afraid that if he looked or smelled, he wouldn't be able to stop himself from begging. But then Julian called his name. He asked Caleb if he was waiting for a formal invitation to come and eat. Caleb went immediately. Pride was no match for an empty stomach, especially when he was invited. The table was covered in comfort food: macaroni and cheese, fried chicken, meatloaf, mashed potatoes, glazed carrots, cornbread, and a hearty beef stew. As a thank you for his generosity, Caleb devoured more than half of it. It was all simple fare, but it was incredibly delicious. It had been years since he'd eaten a meal this good. The taste was so overwhelming that tears started to fall. Julian watched him quietly, his chin propped on his hand, an unreadable expression on his face. He remarked coolly that he'd noticed the last time, too. Caleb cried a lot. Caleb looked up, confused. Was he talking about the warehouse? He'd been in despair. Of course he was crying. Julian seemed to read his mind, a half-smile playing on his lips. He clarified that he was talking about the time Caleb had wildly demanded he fuck him faster. Caleb felt his face burn. The food was no longer enough to shut the man up. He swallowed a mouthful of tender fried chicken and mumbled the truth, apologizing and explaining that he had mistaken him for someone else. He was sincere. Julian, however, did not look pleased. His face darkened as he asked who Caleb had been trying to meet. When he smiled, his face was like a spring breeze, but when he was serious, it was like the dead of winter. It was intimidating. Caleb hunched his shoulders and answered every question. He said it was a college guy he'd met online who was also supposed to be wearing a Hawaiian shirt. Since Julian was at their meeting spot, he'd made a mistake. Julian asked if they hadn't exchanged photos, wondering what would have happened if the guy was ugly. Caleb replied that it didn't matter. He wasn't good-looking either. Julian stared at him, then suddenly swore. He demanded to know who the hell had ever said Caleb wasn't good-looking, threatening to go check if their eyes were working properly. Caleb looked back, confused by his anger. He answered that his parents, his brother, and his husband had all said so. Julian stood up abruptly and went to the balcony. He lit a cigarette but didn't smoke it, crushing it out in an ashtray instead. He returned and said, completely out of the blue, that the man wasn't his husband, he was his late husband. He also told Caleb not to be so reckless in the future, him that he never knew what kind of diseases men out there might have. Caleb shoveled a few more bites of food into his mouth and numbly agreed. He figured Julian thought he was dirty and was afraid of catching something. But he had it wrong. Though Caleb was an omega, his heats were rare. The desire to be filled was an infrequent urge. And since discovering the pregnancy, he had no mental energy for anything else. After dinner, Caleb started clearing the table. Julian joined him and suddenly stated that he was very healthy, rarely got sick, and had a physical every 6 months. Caleb wondered why he was reporting his health status. Was he supposed to do the same? He scratched his head, admitting that his own health wasn't great, that he was often sick. Fearing his crore would see him as a liability, he quickly added that it was nothing contagious, just minor things that didn't require medication. He could push through it and it wouldn't affect his work. Julian looked at him with an indescribable expression, finally letting out a long sigh and muttering that it was no wonder he'd passed out 3 times in one night. With that, he took a bag of trash and left. Caleb spent the night at Julian's place, anxious but undisturbed. The next morning, he asked what his duties were. Julian frowned, thinking for a long moment. He suggested Caleb could start with cleaning and cooking. Then he looked around the massive, multi-level penthouse. He changed his mind, telling Caleb to just rest for now and that he'd figure something out after he finished with his current business. He then handed Caleb a ridiculously patterned tie, asking him how to tie the damn thing and telling him to do it. Caleb belatedly realized Julian wasn't wearing one of his tacky Hawaiian shirts today. Instead, he wore a crisp white button-down and a fitted vest. The change transformed him from a thug leader to a powerful CEO. His already striking features became even more handsome. Caleb took the tie, his mind elsewhere as he looped it around Julian's neck. He thought that Julian surely intended to humiliate him, to treat him like a servant. But he would never guess that for Caleb, this kind of humiliation was nothing. Having enough to eat, a warm place to sleep, it was better than any life he'd known. This wasn't humiliation. He was almost grateful for it. Halfway through tying the knot, Julian lifted his hand. Caleb flinched instinctively, squeezing his eyes shut and curling into himself. Julian froze. He asked if Caleb thought he was going to hit him. He was furious. He yanked the tie off and threw it on the floor, cursing. He snapped that he wasn't that kind of person. His ear had just been itching. Then he stormed away, his shoulders stiff with anger. Caleb peeked up at his retreating back. He had broad shoulders, a narrow waist, and long legs. But his ears, Caleb noticed, were bright red. It was his fault for being so skittish. When he used to tie his late husband's tie, it was never right. Too fast, too slow, too loose, too tight. If his husband was displeased, for any reason at all, a hand would fly out, a slap or a fist. Caleb had learned to endure, but that didn't mean he wasn't afraid. He picked the tie up from the floor, washed it, and hung it on the balcony to dry. It was windy today. The colorful strip of silk danced in the breeze, and he found his eyes drawn to it again and again. Caleb lived at Julian's for a week. Julian still hadn't assigned him any tasks, nor had he asked for any more help. Caleb figured his timid, jumpy demeanor probably annoyed him. Overcome with boredom, he decided to make his own work. There was an unused rooftop terrace. He called Julian and asked if he could use the space to plant some vegetables or flowers. Julian told him to do whatever he wanted and hung up. Before Caleb could ask about getting tools, a group of Julian's tattooed men showed up and tilled the planters for him to stay back. He kept his distance, a knot of unease in his stomach. He hid around a corner and watched them work. Two of the younger guys were awkwardly turning over soil with shovels. One of them grumbled that he thought working for the boss meant digging graves, not being put on gardening duty. He complained about the boss being crazy, treating a debtor like he was royalty. A blond man told him to keep his voice down or the boss would cut his tongue out. Besides, he added, gardening was better than collections and the pay was the same. And the guy's belly was so big, he couldn't be expected to do it himself. A man with a buzz cut responded calmly, asking why he would even want to plant a garden if he couldn't do the work himself. He thought Caleb was just making trouble, suggesting he'd be better off seducing the boss. If he succeeded, he'd be set for life, and even if he failed, the boss wouldn't harm a pregnant man. The blond man continued to speculate, but the man with the buzz cut just smiled, remarking that the 10 lashes the boss gave him last time weren't enough to teach him anything. The boss didn't need to be. He trailed off, suddenly looking around alertly. His eyes landed on Caleb, who hadn't ducked back in time. Caught, Caleb met their gaze awkwardly and apologized for eavesdropping. The man with the buzz cut looked just as embarrassed. He turned and smacked the blonde on the head, assuring Caleb they were just talking nonsense and that he shouldn't take it to heart. Soon after, they finished and left behind several packets of seeds, the ones Caleb had mentioned to Julian. As he planted the seeds, he wondered if there was any chance of him successfully seducing Julian. He wasn't attractive, he had no money, and he was heavily pregnant. The babies were Julian's, but he didn't know that. Still, Caleb couldn't help but fantasize. If Julian could accept him even with all that, if he would be willing to build a life with him, Caleb would tell him the truth immediately. What he wanted more than anything was a family of his own. After much deliberation, he steeled himself to try. A father was better than no father. And a father was definitely better than a father who was also his other father's crore. Took him a week to build up the courage. By then, Julian had finished his business and was home most of the time, often walking around shirtless. He had incredible control over his pheromones, 1,000,000 times better than his late husband. Caleb figured he had nothing to lose by trying to seduce him. He was the one who would be at a disadvantage. He looked up seduction techniques on social media. At dinner, He shakily extended his foot to brush against Julian's leg. Julian paused, then silently pulled his long legs back and sat up straight. Caleb's face burned, but he tried again. Head down, pretending to be focused on his food, he stretched his leg out to touch Julian's again. It was too far. His leg went too high, bumping against Julian's thigh. The sound of a chair clattering to the floor echoed in the quiet room. Julian shot to his feet, staring at him. He asked Caleb if his foot was itching. The tone was exactly the same as asking if he was looking for a beating. Fear shot through him. He quickly retracted his foot, wringing his hands. He apologized, saying it was an accident. Julian's neck was rigid with anger. He left the table without finishing his meal and stormed back to his room. After Caleb finished eating and cleaning up, he took a nap. Julian didn't come back downstairs for hours. When he did, he had only a towel wrapped around his waist. Droplets of water traced paths down his muscular torso, disappearing into the fabric. He must have a thing about cleanliness, Caleb thought. A couple of accidental touches from his foot, and he'd spent 2 hours in the shower. Or maybe he just thought Caleb was dirty. Why let him stay here then? A pang of sadness hit him, and he moved away. Julian frowned, his voice hoarse as he asked if he looked like a ghost. Why Caleb was so afraid of him. Seduction still pending, he knew he had to keep trying. He forced himself to sit beside Julian, offering to dry his hair. Julian froze, his expression twisting. He took a deep breath and handed over the blow dryer. Caleb's fingers were long but not elegant. His skin was rough, his fingertips calloused. He couldn't create the kind of romantic scene you saw in movies. He could only mimic their slow movements, brushing his fingers through Julian's hair, gently grazing his scalp, over and over. His movements became slower as self-doubt crept in. Could someone as clumsy as him ever hope to seduce a man like Julian? He must have been too slow. Before Julian's hair was fully dry, he stood up abruptly, snatching the dryer from Caleb's hand. He grumbled about how slow he was being. Then, red-faced and flustered, he walked stiffly up the stairs. Caleb looked at his own hands and gave a bitter smile. He felt a wave of defeat. His parents were right. He was useless. No one but a man like his late husband would ever want him. What was he thinking, trying to seduce someone like Julian? He had to give up. He became quiet again. He ate his meals, he slept, he tended to his garden. For 3 days, he and Julian barely spoke. Julian seemed agitated, pacing around, sometimes getting close, sometimes staying far away. Caleb didn't know what he wanted. He wasn't good at reading people. It was too painful. It was easier to hide. So he retreated to his room. Then the unthinkable happened. His heat, which sometimes went years without appearing, suddenly flared up. The last time had been that night he'd mistaken Julian for someone else, and it had come on mid-encounter. A deep, searing heat spread from his core. There was a slickness between his legs. His scalp prickled. He rushed to lock the door, then wrapped himself in a comforter and hid in the back of the closet. He told himself it was fine. He had endured it the day he first presented as an omega. He had begged his mother for suppressants, but his parents said they were too expensive. They said he was destined to be sold off to another family anyway, so spending money on him was a losing investment. They told him to hide himself away when his heat came, and if he ran out and got assaulted, it wasn't their problem. He had been more heartbroken then than he was now. He huddled in the small space, almost masochistically reliving the past. Before he presented, his parents had loved him. After that day, he no longer knew what love was. Later, when his brother presented as an alpha, he understood. It wasn't that the suppressants were too expensive. It was that he wasn't worth the cost. He didn't know what love was, but he knew with certainty what it wasn't. Fortunately, his heats had been rare and mild ever since. It was one of his few blessings. Was his luck running out now? He bit down on his fingers until they bled. Someone was knocking on the door. He ignored it. The knocking grew louder. He pressed himself further into the corner of the closet, trying to block out the world, until his hearing faded and his consciousness grew dim. The closet door was pulled open. The comforter was ripped away. A sliver of light pierced the darkness, blinding him. It felt like someone was giving him a shot in the arm. He was gathered into a pair of strong arms, a hand gently patting his back. A voice reassured him that it was okay not to be afraid. A light, cool scent of pheromones filled his senses, soothing the turmoil inside him. The heat receded rapidly, and he fell into a deep sleep in the man's arms. When he awoke, Julian was slumped over the side of the bed, asleep. Caleb realized he was the one holding onto Julian's hand, forcing him to sleep in that uncomfortable position. His injured fingers were covered with small bandages. A sharp pang went through his heart. He let go, and the movement stirred Julian, who woke up. Caleb was confused. He asked him why he hadn't taken advantage of an omega in heat. After they were married, even during his mildest heats, the slightest change in his scent would make his husband grin viciously and torment him, calling omegas pathetic, worthless creatures without an alpha. Julian stared at him, then his fists clenched. He cursed, saying he wanted to find whoever had filled Caleb's head with that garbage. Did he think all alphas were animals? Was Caleb looking down on him or on himself? Caleb looked up at him, a sudden thought striking him. He stated flatly that it was still leaking. Julian was silent. Then he asked, "What?" Caleb swore this was his last attempt. Success or failure, this was it. He took Julian's hand and guided it behind him. He whispered that this place wanted him. A vein throbbed in Julian's forehead. He snatched his hand back. He looked up at Caleb, his voice strained as he asked him to be clear. Did he want him, or did he just want an alpha? Was there a difference? He replied that he needed him, this alpha. Julian wasn't satisfied with that answer. He pulled out a syringe of suppressant. Caleb had seen the brand on TV. It was expensive. Julian asked if he wasn't clear-headed enough, offering another shot. Caleb moved away. A despicable thought crossed his mind. He was the debtor, yet he was trying to use Julian, even using his own heat to seduce him. He was shameless. His parents were right. He was born with inferior genes. It didn't matter if Julian rejected him. He just didn't want to owe him any more than he already did. He got out of bed and started walking toward the door. Julian asked where he was going. Without turning back, Caleb answered honestly that he was going to find an alpha to sleep with. It was cheaper that way. He didn't make it out the door. Julian grabbed his wrist, his grip tight enough to hurt. He was grinding his teeth, his jaw clenched. He threw the suppressant into the trash can and took several deep, ragged breaths. After a long moment, he asked again, was it cheaper than him? He only wanted $100. Caleb didn't understand. He said that Julian didn't want to sleep with him. He tried to seduce him several times, and all it did was make him angry. Julian exploded. Who the hell said he didn't want to sleep with him? He wanted to be with a clear-headed Caleb who actually liked him. He paused. What seduction? He thought for a few seconds, his eyes widening in disbelief. That was seduction? He thought he was just being a pervert. His expression shifted, breaking into a wide, eight-toothed grin. He chuckled, asking if Caleb had been trying to seduce him, if he liked him. Caleb didn't dare to like anyone. He shook his head. Julian's face fell instantly. Then why was he seducing him? Caleb told him the truth. He wanted a better life. Julian was handsome, rich, and he didn't hit people. Julian started grinning again, that same strange, happy laugh. He agreed with all the compliments, but then said who the hell would hit an old-fashioned guy like him? Caleb replied that he was indeed old-fashioned, but he wasn't old. He was only 22. Julian fell silent, looking at him strangely. After a long moment, he said that Caleb needed to fight for what he wanted. He was giving him a chance. He told him to think carefully about how to properly seduce him. Caleb looked into his eyes. They were narrow and deep, but they held a light. He glanced down at his strong nose, his soft lips. All the seduction tips he'd learned from online videos vanished from his mind. He stretched his neck forward and kissed him. Julian returned the kiss with a smile, deep and searching. He stumbled back a few steps, falling onto the sofa and pulling Caleb into his lap. When he let Caleb come up for air, he was beaming. He praised him, saying this was how it should be. If Caleb was willing to kiss him, then he could kiss him back. He grumbled playfully that Caleb had claimed not to like him. Yet last time, he wouldn't even let him kiss him when they were already. He hummed triumphantly. He knew Caleb liked him. Caleb froze. He pushed Julian away, his mind a tangled mess. He liked him. He liked his crore. Julian's hand slid under his shirt, one hand supporting his waist while the other roamed freely. Paused when it reached his stomach. He lifted the fabric and bent his head, placing a soft kiss on Caleb's round belly. He murmured that he was saying hello to the babies. A blush spread across Caleb's face, so intense even his skin turned pink. Julian's eyes lifted, fixing on his chest. He commented that the cherries had gotten bigger and asked if there was any cherry milk. Caleb, mortified, pushed his head away and told him to shut up. Julian's eyes twinkled. He said Caleb would have to find a way to shut him up. His fingertips pressed against Caleb's chest, then traced a line to his lips and finally down to his rear. He asked which one he should use or if he should choose all of them. Now, it wasn't just his face that was on fire. He shifted uncomfortably, mumbling that the sofa would get dirty. Julian raised an eyebrow and gently pushed Caleb back onto the cushions, kneeling between his legs. He said he understood. Caleb wanted him to protect the sofa. Then he pulled off Caleb's pants and buried his face between his thighs. Caleb was confused, asking what he was doing. Julian just laughed, calling it a top-shelf experience. Caleb planted a foot on his shoulder and tried to push him away, but Julian was solid as a rock. He simply grabbed Caleb's ankle and pulled it wider. He told him not to rush, that he was about to formally greet the babies. Julian stood up and unfastened his pants. Even before he took them off, Caleb could see the large bulge beneath the gray sweatpants. The scent of a dominant alpha was intoxicating, making him dizzy with desire. He knew now what the 8 inches referred to. It wasn't small. It was huge. It made his whole body ache with a pleasant soreness. Julian moved slowly, chanting to himself like a mantra. Don't be impulsive, go slow. He told himself he could do this, that he was a real man who had resisted countless omegas. But then he admitted he had never once been able to resist his little cherry. He cursed, then resumed his chant. Listening to him, Caleb started to laugh. And as he laughed, Julian stopped. He gently moved Caleb's hands from his face and wiped away his tears. He asked why he was crying. He told him to say if it hurt, to hit him if he needed to, but not to cry. Caleb sobbed, clutching his chest. He asked Julian why it hurt there, if he had somehow managed to reach his heart. Julian's mouth twitched. He didn't think he was that. He shuddered, a look of pure bliss on his face as a corner of his mouth lifted in a smirk. He leaned down and hugged him tightly, exclaiming that he knew Caleb had feelings for him. He declared that they were getting married. As soon as he was done taking care of him, they were going to get a license. Caleb stared at the ceiling. Why was Julian so good to him? Why would he want to marry him, a person with nothing? Maybe just as love could vanish without, it could also appear just as suddenly. He didn't understand why, but he didn't want to think about it too much. It was too tiring. He nodded. Okay. Julian froze, seemingly shocked that he had agreed so easily. Caleb kicked his ass. Serve me well. The mantra was useless now. Julian was like a wild animal, driven mad by passion. It was a full day before he finally calmed down. He didn't sleep, instead staying up to massage Caleb's legs. The next morning, Before Caleb was fully awake, he was bundled into a car. When he opened his eyes again, they were parked in front of the city marriage bureau. A diamond the size of a pigeon's egg was on his finger. The back seat was filled with sunflowers. He remembered telling Julian he wanted to plant sunflowers. He had remembered. Life, bright and turning toward the light. Could Julian become his light? He was lost in thought when Julian spoke. He said that the sunflowers Caleb planted wouldn't bloom until next year, so these would have to do for now. He told Caleb to listen closely because he was proposing. He said Caleb was beautiful. The first time he saw him, he'd just been drugged by a rival branch of his family, forcing an early rut. He'd been in that situation countless times before and had always resisted. But with Caleb, he couldn't bring himself to throw him out. He liked his face. Later, in bed, Caleb had completely ignored his rhythm, seeking mental release through physical pain. The contradiction had fascinated and infuriated him. His lips were beautiful, like cherries, and he'd wanted to kiss them. He thought someone so desperate wouldn't mind a kiss, but Caleb had minded. He'd been so confused. He was handsome, he was great in bed, what was the big deal? But okay, no kiss. But how could he just sleep with him and run? And not just run, but leave $100 bill stuck to his forehead? That was too much. He swore he'd find him and teach him a lesson. He had his people investigate him. As he learned more, he just felt that Caleb was so damn pitiful. He decided he wouldn't hurt him when he found him. If Caleb apologized, he'd forgive him and personally oversee his future. But not only did he not apologize, he immediately grabbed a gun and tried to kill himself. He was unbelievable. Julian paused, his tone becoming serious. He continued, telling Caleb that making others love you can be hard, but loving yourself should be easy. He suddenly pulled a gun from the inner pocket of his sharp suit and handed it to Caleb. He said it was loaded with 6 rounds. From now on, if anyone made him unhappy, he could just take care of them. He leaned in, pressing his forehead to Caleb's. He said he trusted him not to hurt innocent people. After all, he hadn't shot him when he'd had the chance. He told Caleb that even stars die and grow dim, unable to light up others. He had to be his own star. Was this something a loan shark boss should be saying? Caleb was silent for a few seconds. Then, hugging his stomach, he burst out laughing so hard that tears streamed down his face. He told Julian to go back to being himself. This serious act was making him uncomfortable. Julian told him to be careful, gently wiping his face. He said he expected tears of joy, but this was a bit much. Caleb took the gun and used the barrel to lift Julian's chin. He leaned in and kissed him. He told him his lines were wrong. A proposal should ask if he was willing to marry him. So, are you willing? Will I be able to walk all over you from now on? Julian held the back of his neck, their tongues tangling. You can sit on my face and piss for all I care. Seriously, wasn't he the one being over the top? His repertoire was a bit much. Caleb wasn't sure he could handle it. But even if he couldn't, he had to try. Where else would he find someone as foolish as himself? He had to seize this chance. I do. After getting the marriage license, Caleb went to a nearby jewelry store. He used the money he'd saved over the past 6 months to buy a diamond ring. The stone wasn't big, but it was everything he had. He slipped the ring onto Julian's finger. He leaned in close to his ear and told him a secret. The babies in his belly were his. Julian's eyes went wide, his face shifting from white to red. He finally understood why he couldn't find the so-called father after weeks of searching. He had been preparing himself to be a stepdad for nothing. He demanded to know why Caleb hadn't said so sooner. Caleb replied that he was afraid Julian would take his children. Julian scoffed, saying it was more likely he'd be fighting the kids for Caleb's attention. At least with Caleb, he got fed. With them, it would be all one way. He changed the subject, asking why Caleb had been so enthusiastic that first night, but so different when they met again. Caleb scratched his head, deciding to just be honest. The difference between a one-night stand you'll never see again and a crore you'll have to see for the rest of your life was pretty big. Julian was silent. Then he awkwardly changed the subject again. He said he had some good news for Caleb. Caleb's brother, Ethan, had recently borrowed millions from various sources, gambled it all away, and couldn't pay it back. Now his whole family was getting daily visits from collectors. Julian had put the word out that they weren't to be given any slack. He also warned that Caleb's parents would probably try to find him, so he should never go out without him. He wasn't trying to lock him up. He wanted to go out with him. His ex-husband had always told him to stay home, not to go out and embarrass him. The difference between two people could be so vast. Caleb didn't understand it. He just nodded. He had expected this. Ethan had started hanging around with his late husband a long time ago and had picked up his gambling habits. He would even beat their parents to get money from them. And still, they doted on him. Caleb couldn't control it, and he didn't want to. His late husband had taken his own life when threatened by crores. The future for his parents and brother would not be easy. He looked up at Julian, squinting into the light. He smiled faintly. "Honey, you don't have to tell me about them anymore. I don't care." Julian froze, then a massive grin spread across his face. "Honey," he chuckled. Okay, honey. Whatever my wife says." He giggled to himself. Caleb suddenly realized they had never said they liked each other. He couldn't see it before, but now it was obvious. He thought about what Julian had said. "If you're willing to kiss me, then I can kiss you back." It could be rewritten. "If you're willing to accept me, then I can love you." Julian really, really liked him. And he liked him too. He liked his face and his body. He liked how good he was to him. He liked that despite his wild exterior, he was always thoughtful. He liked the silly way he smiled when he wore his tacky Hawaiian shirts. He liked him,